What is going on, guys? Welcome back to another video. So if you're watching this, the Florida Panthers just won the Stanley Cup. Yes, I pre-recorded another video once the Florida Panthers win up 3-0. And considering the Florida Panthers are Stanley Cup champions and are a great Stanley Cup champion, a worthy Stanley Cup champion, and one of the best Stanley Cup champions of the last decade, I thought it'd be a fun idea to rank the last 10 starting in 2015 through 2024. The last 10, we're going to go through it right now based on how good they were in the regular season, how good they were in the playoffs, the overall roster talent. Did they have any flaws? Because we're looking at this Florida Panthers team. They are a very, very good team. Yes, they maybe lack a number one defenseman, a true number one, but they have a three-headed monster of Montour, Ekblad, and Forsling. They have two legit superstar forwards, a star goalie, and so much goddamn fucking depth. So we're going to go through this right now. Again, 2015 to 2024, I'm going to rank them. These are all very good teams. There really wasn't a fluke champion. Just in general, there's never really like a true fluke champion, like maybe the Montreal Canadiens won in 2021. But these are all very good teams. I'm not trying to shit on any of these teams. But without further ado, let's start it up. And we're going to start with the Chicago Blackhawks in 2015 at number 10. 2010, amazing team. That's one of the better Cup champs of the 21st century. 2013, genuinely one of the greatest teams of all time, 77 points in 48 games and ran through the playoffs. 2015, though, it was obviously towards the end of the dynasty, considering this was the last cup that they won, but also some of their guys were starting to get up there in age. Kane was definitely still in his prime. He won the goddamn Hart the following year. Jonathan Toews was 27. He was better earlier on in the 2010s. Duncan Keith was 31, Hossa 36, Sharp 33, Seabrook 30, and when looking at them, only 102 points during the regular season, which was third in their division, 16th in the NHL in goals. They were fantastic defensively. They were first in goals against in the entire NHL. Their run, 16-7, one game 7, two other game 6s. Again, a very, very good, worthy Cup champion, but this definitely was the weakest of the Chicago Blackhawks. Still a lot of top-end talent, still two legit superstars, and a great defenseman and a solid goalie, but nothing really special in terms of this team. It was their worst team. Next up, I got the 2019 St. Louis Blues. Now, when looking at them, they don't have the most impressive in terms of record. I believe they only had 99 points, but that's because they fired their coach, Mike Yeo, for Craig Berube at the start of the season. With Berube, they went 38-19-6, good for a 107-point pace. They were 11th in goals for under Craig Berube, second in goals against, and this was a very deep team. Yes, Tarasenko and Ryan O'Reilly were stars, maybe not superstars as well as Alex Pietrangelo, but when looking at their forward core, Tarasenko, Ryan O'Reilly, Braden Shen, David Perron, Jaden Schwartz, Alexander Steen, Tyler Bozak, a young Robert Thomas, Ivan Barbashev, extremely deep. So yes, maybe they didn't have two superstar forwards, but they had two stars and just a shit ton of high-level top 6 guys. And with the defense core, Pietrangelo was a legit top 10, maybe even top 5 defenseman in the entire NHL, as well as also having a young 35-point Vince Dunn, Colton Parayko, Jay Bouwmeester, Joel Edmondson, and Robert Bortuzzo. When looking at it, just such a deep team, as well as Jordan Binnington playing fantastic for them. A 9-27 in the regular season after coming out of nowhere seemingly, as well as a very good 9-14 in the playoffs. So yes, although Chicago maybe has the more superstars, obviously, I think the St. Louis Blues are the better team just because they have far more depth and they're a far younger team. This St. Louis Blues team, well worthy, playing that Game 7 in the Stanley Cup Final and absolutely shitting on the Boston Bruins. Fantastic work by them. At number 8, the 2017 Pittsburgh Penguins. When looking at them, they were an offensive wagon. They led the entire league in goals that season. Defensively, not quite as good, 17th in goals against, and that is where I have some criticisms with this team. The big three was still elite of Malkin, Crosby, and Letang, as well as having some solid pieces like Gensel, Brian Rust, Justin Schultz, not Jason Schultz, and Matt Murray came out of nowhere yet again to save the day for this team. Not that good defensively, but an absolute offensive wagon. I do think the 2016 team was better, though, for the Pittsburgh Penguins. 2023 Vegas Golden Knights check in at 7th, similarly to the St. Louis Blues of 2019. Maybe not the most superstar, talented, loaded team, but a shit ton of depth. Mark Stone and Jack Eichel were star players. Jack Eichel, a legit number 1 center, top 20 player in the entire NHL. Mark Stone, one of the better two-way right wingers in the entire NHL. Pietrangelo, still a legit number 1, while also having a guy like Shea Theodore, who I think has been extremely underrated throughout his entire career. When he is healthy, he's He's like a 60, 65 point number one offensive defenseman. Jonathan Marchessault, such a fantastic player. 42 goals this season. Last year won the goddamn Conn Smythe. Bill Carlson, fantastic two-way second-line center. A 65-point Chandler Stevenson that season. Riley Smith, Ivan Barbashev. This team didn't see a single Game 7 during their run. Ended up going 16-6. Yes, they maybe didn't have a legit goalie in Adin Hill, but he played like a legit proven goalie. But Adin Hill, during the regular season as well as the playoffs, was fantastic. And when you're as good defensively as the Vegas Golden Knights were in the back half of the year in the playoffs, you don't really need an absolute Vezina caliber guy back then. They were such a fantastically sound defensive team while also having a lot of offensive firepower and just such a physical group that was able to push people around, like the Edmonton Oilers in the second round, like even the Florida Panthers in the Cup final. They would suffocate teams, and I think that they are a very, very worthy Stanley Cup champion. At number six, I have the 2018 Washington Capitals. Now, when look at the Capitals, the funny thing about this is in 2016 and 2017, that's when they won the President's Trophy. That's when they were regular season wagons. They didn't make a single Eastern Conference final in those years, but then in 2018, they had 105 points, would go on to win the Stanley Cup, and they checked off everything that you look for in a Stanley Cup winning team. They had a star goalie, Braden Holtby, obviously, John Carlson, legit number one defenseman, and a superstar forward in Alexander Ovechkin, while also having a shit ton of depth. Playoff Kuznetsov led the entire NHL in playoff points, had 32. It was insane. Backstrom was still very elite. That 1-2 punch of Kuznetsov and Backstrom was so impressive, while also having some physical guys like Tom Wilson, TJ Oshie, Dmitry Orlov, and maybe a little bit of a younger Andrei Burakovsky. This was a very worthy team. They maybe didn't dominate during the regular season like in prior years, but they took care of business in the playoffs, beat a very good Tampa Bay team in the Eastern Conference Finals, and then made light work of the Vegas Golden Knights in the Stanley Cup Final in 5 games. A fantastic overall team. Number 5, I got the 2016 Penguins. I think that this is the better Penguins team when looking at it. They started off very slow. They fired Mike Johnston. They swapped out one Mike for another, got Mike Sullivan in the building, and then after that, they went 33-16-5, which was a 108-point pace. In the offense, one of the most exciting offensive teams in recent memory. Once Mike Sullivan got hired for the remaining 54 games, they averaged 3.24 goals per game, which doesn't seem like a lot nowadays, but back in 2016, that was insane. For reference, that led the entire NHL. The next closest was 3.09. So they were an offensive wagon. Crosby, Malkin, the Tang, much like 2017, still playing at a very high level. And their path to the Stanley Cup final. Also, Nick Bonino balled out for this team, but their path was absolutely insane to the Stanley Cup. In the first round, they played the New York Rangers, who won the President's Trophy the prior year. Then in the second round, they played the Washington Capitals, who won the President's Trophy that year. Then in the Eastern Conference Finals, they played the Tampa Bay Lightning, who made the Stanley Cup Finals the prior year. And then they played a San Jose Sharks team that was so deep, had so many big names: Joe Thornton, Burns, Couture, Hurdle, Marleau. Just a fantastic overall team. Vlasic, when he was still very elite, Martin Jones. They really deserved it. And under Mike Sullivan, they looked like a completely different team and was absolutely electric. At number 4, this is where I slot the Florida Panthers. Yes, this is a picture of them after they won the Eastern Conference, and I think this is from last year, considering Radko Gudas is in it. But disregard that. When looking at this Florida Panthers team, yes, maybe they don't have the big names like the 2018 Capitals and the 2016 Pittsburgh Penguins, but I think that they still have 2 superstars, obviously, in Barkov and Tkachuk. I've always said that they're like top 12 players in the entire NHL, but with them, their depth is absolutely insane. You look at their 3rd and 4th best forwards, you got a guy that scored 57 fucking goals this year in Sam Reinhart, as well as another former 40-goal scorer in Carter Verhaeghe, Vladimir Tarasenko on the goddamn third line, other key pieces like Anton Lundell, Evan Rodriguez, Sam Bennett, just such a fantastic top 9. I think it's a better top 9 than the 2 prior teams. Yes, on defense, they didn't really have that number 1, but again, as I said at the start, the 3-headed monster got it done, as well as guys like Kulikov, Mikkola, and OEL, all knowing their role and executing it to a high level. And then in net, you do have that star goaltender in Sergei Bobrovsky that was a Vezina finalist this year, as well as playing fantastic from the Eastern Conference Finals on. The first 2 rounds, not that good, but he really showed up when it matters. So this team, their physicality, blend of both physicality and skill, their forecheck, they just pressure the absolute shit out of you, and they took care of business pretty easily in the Stanley Cup Finals. So I got to have them pretty high. I'm not going to have them top 3 quite yet, in my opinion. I don't think that they were really that good of a team, but definitely worthy at the number 4 spot. At the number 3 spot, I have the 2020 Tampa Bay Lightning. The 2020 Tampa Bay Lightning, they were fresh off a 128-point season where obviously they got embarrassed. They got swept by the Columbus Blue Jackets, had a lot to prove during the season. 92 points in 70 games before the COVID shutdown, 108-point pace. When looking at them, they were first in the entire NHL in goals for, ninth in the entire NHL in goals against. Vasilevsky, Hedman, Kucherov, all probably the best players at their respective positions in the entire NHL, while having a shit ton of depth. This is where they went out at the deadline and assembled that insane third line of Coleman, Gaudreau, and Gord, trading for Gaudreau and Coleman with the New Jersey Devils and the San Jose Sharks back when Barclay Gaudreau wasn't actually a good player. Now, Stamkos was hurt for this playoff run. He obviously played like a couple shifts, and I think it was game 1 against the Dallas, or no, I think it was like game 3 once they were up, and he scored that one goal. But you can't really count. Stamkos wasn't technically on this team during the playoff run, so it was a little bit tough. I don't think they are the better of the Tampa Bay Stanley Cup champions, but this team was still very, very good. I believe they didn't go to a single game 7 in this playoff round, took care of the Islanders in the Eastern Conference Finals, then the Dallas Stars in 5 games in the Stanley Cup. At number 2, I got the 2021 Tampa Bay Lightning. Basically the exact same team for the most part, but a healthy Steven Stamkos. They ended up trading for David Savard with the Columbus Blue Jackets at the deadline. This team put up a 109-point pace without Nikita Kucherov during the regular season. They were 6th in the entire NHL in goals for, 8th in goals against. And then just come playoff time, Vasilevsky put up a goddamn 937, and they obviously had Nikita Kucherov. This team on paper, I think, is one of the most impressive, deepest, as well as having 5 future Hall of Famers, most likely. It was insane. Now, when looking at them, yes, they did play the Montreal Canadiens in the Stanley Cup final, but they took care of them so easily, as well as going 7 with the New York Islanders. But I still think on paper, this is one of the most talented teams of all time. But at number 1, you can probably assume who I'm going with. I'm going with the 2022 Colorado Avalanche. I mean, just when looking at this team, 119 points during the regular season, 3rd in goals for, 7th in goals against. 2 out of arguably the 3 best players in the entire NHL at the time, with Cale Makar, who won the Norris, Nathan MacKinnon, who was also fantastic overall. They also had elite players like Devon Toews, Gabriel Landeskog, Nazem Kadri, and Valeri Nichushkin were all high borderline, probably like top 75, top 60 players in the entire NHL. And then in terms of depth, they had Burakovsky, they had Lehkonen, Sam Girard, Bowen Byram, Manson, Comfer. They were just amazing, man. They had legitimately 2 superstars, as well as also Mikko Rantanen, another 4 to 5 elite players, and then a bunch of good depth pieces. The criticism with this team is obviously in net. Darcy Kemper played like shit in the playoffs, and they still won the fucking Stanley Cup, which just shows how good they were. But Darcy Kemper overall in that season, during the regular season, he had a 921, and at the time, he was still a good starting goalie. So I think if you pit this team against the other Tampa Bay teams or even the Florida Panthers, I'd assume that Darcy Kemper would play better than being literally a net negative goaltender. So when looking at it, I don't think the goaltending is as bad. It's not like they had a complete bum back there. But yeah, here is my full top 10. Let me know in the comments. What do you think about it? Who would you move up? Who would you move down? These teams are all, again, very, very good, worthy Stanley Cup champions, and I'll be seeing the next one.